Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our weekly reading of Nietzsche's The Gay Science. We're starting this week with number 53. Wait, did we finish number 53?
We did 52. We paused on
Oh, great,
53.
great. Perfect. Yes, I did take notes on that. Great. Human, All Too Human, a book. That is the title. You're sad and shy when looking at the past. But trust the future when when yourself you trust. Are you some kind of eagle in pursuit? Or just Minerva's favorite? Oot, oot, oot.
Ein 50. Menschliches als zu Menschliches. Ein Buch. Schwermütig scheu, solang der rückwärts. Start that one again. Schwermütig scheu, solang du rückwärts schaust, der Zukunft trauend, wo du selber dir traust. O Vogel, rechn ich dich den Adlern zu, bist du Minervas Liebling, uhuhu. So, uhuhu is like the sound an owl makes.
Right.
That's my guess there. The Minerva reference. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure that's a reference to owls. Like Minerva's love. Or owl.
Mm,
Could be wrong,
what it
though.
is, it's kind of an art reference in that the goddess Minerva is usually portrayed with an owl, symbolizing wisdom.
Yeah,
And
the goddess of
her
wisdom.
owl only takes off at dusk.
Awesome, thank you. Please keep coming to the readings, JQE. You have always good things to add.
I
Jay,
will
were
note.
you? Oh, sorry, I was just going to add to the Minerva. When you said leave at dusk, were you referring to the Hegelian line of the Minervian owl who knowledge only kind of comes too late?
Yeah, that would be a reference to the owl only sort of taking flight. I've just heard someone saying, giving that sort of the owl only seems to take flight at dusk, and that is what it's sort of referring to.
Yeah, it seems interesting that it's like it feels like a shot at Hegelian kind of understanding and juxtaposing that instead with maybe some kind of more Nietzschean eagle.
Yeah, I mean the eagle. I mean, it would be later in his work, but the eagle of sort of the parable of the sheep and the eagle definitely comes to mind. I will note the translation in the Stanford edition has a very different wording of the first sentence. When you're looking back, you're sad and not robust. Not super different, but definitely different. Different wording and slightly different sentence structure there.
And shy is omitted.
Yeah, let's look at the German. Let's see. I'm not sure it's. I think shy might be an insertion or sort of his interpretation of. Let's see. Okay, no. Shy seems a little bit more original. At least Do you have any comments on that, Rumpel?
Yeah, so scheu is shy. Schwermutig. Mutig is to have muster, to have courage. Schwermutig is kind of like a cheerfulness. So it's sort of like a cheerful shyness, so long as you look backwards. That's after the comma.
Oh, cheerful shyness. Are you sure on that? Because that's interesting. Because that doesn't seem to be in any of the translation that I see.
Oops. Not cheerful. It translates as melancholy, sorry.
Ah, okay, yes.
My bad. Yep. So it's like a melancholic shyness, provided as long as you look backwards.
Right. Okay.
But the
Just
shyness
dropped
is
a
given an
painting
adjective.
Painting of Minerva, right.
Little painting of Minerva there with the owl.
Trust the future when yourself you trust. Sort of this idea of like self-assuredness, right? And self-assuredness being related to like a hopefulness. Maybe hopefulness is not quite the right word, but like a acceptance of the future, right?
It's a bit existentialist.
Yeah. So the owl, is the owl here then the one looking at the past? Kind of reminds me of one of the aphorisms from Twilight of the Idols. I think that one was about looking sideways, though, like a crab.
Are you as a bird like an eagle rushing, or are you wise like an owl? Which bird are you?
But I think the eagle is sort of full of assuredness in this phrasing. Like the owl is the one that's sort of unsure.
Definitely, yeah, definitely more the contemplative animal.
I mean, so Reggie asks, I wonder why he chose two birds after the two very temporal verses. Well, I think he's sort of contrasting two different types of vision, right? And I think that using the metaphor of birds here is very interesting, especially when talking about something like vision, right? It's a very he's talking about looking at the past and sort of looking hopefully into the future, looking trustfully into the future, or looking assuredly into the future. And then he's sort of contrasting this with, I guess I don't know too much about the eyes of owls have good eyesight, I guess.
The pursuit part, I'd be interested to see how the Stanford takes that, because it's not really specifically implied. The third line begins with O Vogel, Komma. Rechne ich dich denn den Adler zu? So it's like, oh bird, could I calculate or could I suggest that you are like the eagle? Are
Yeah,
you
it
like the
says,
eagle?
"Oh bird, do you belong to the eagle's blood?" Brood.
Yeah.
Brood. Apologies.
No, pursuit. Pursuit is inserted by Kaufman.
Ooh, okay, yeah. So he's just talking about the brood of the eagle. Interesting.
Yeah, like of
Or
oh
the
bird,
are you the kin of the eagle?
listener or reader, oh bird, of the birds that you could be, like, are you an eagle? Is kind of there's no the pursuit. Rechne ich dich den Adler zu? Is kind of like saying, are you similar to the eagle or like, are you one of like, are you of the type eagle? It's not like,
Yeah, the sort of the
are you
kinship
near
or
the
the
eagle and
similarity.
therefore is there like a this pursuit thing is weird. Yeah.
I also need to, I guess, bookmark the notes from various sections because it looks like the footnotes are all in the back. So pull that up. But yeah, that's interesting that that seems to be completely inserted.
We have more comments or things to brood over, or should we do 54?
I was just gonna check Adrian Del Caro's notes on this. One other thing I would note for the goddess Minerva is she was also identified with medicine. I often forget that association, but it has that in the notes here. Don't know how necessarily. Yeah, I think Afnan is right that it's sort of talking about the event and whether it's sort of constructing the event out of the past or sort of this more processual becoming into the future. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily what they were getting at, but that's how I would kind of take it.
Hello.
Hello.
May I?
Yeah, go
Hi.
ahead.
Yeah, so I think it's yeah, so the person who mentioned Hegel, it's definitely taking on Hegel. So basically, Hegel's would say that epistemology or like logic or philosophy would come later at the night through Minerva, the bird, that would come later, the owl, which would be only after the event. It would associate itself after everything had, like, everything happened already. So it's always looking into the past, what happened. And when everything is done, philosophy is able to um, uh, like take its concepts, or the concepts comes during or after things happened already. But obviously, to Nietzsche, if you understand hermeneutics, then hermeneutics, it's not about something that happened already. It's rather something that will happen, but what is not entirely unknown. So the etymology of the origin of the Greeks word hermeneutics comes from the Greek myth of Hermes, who was the messenger between like of God, and so he was the one who will close the gaps between, or the gap between
Oh, I
human
was
language.
muted. I didn't realize. I was going to say Hermes also guided souls to the afterlife as well.
Yes, exactly. So he would close this gap between the absolute and the humans, but in nature's way of thinking, then the absolute over here is not God or God, but rather the virtual, whatever the thing that will always. So the event always happens, and they always happen, and they're not fully unknown. They're not things that come to us as surprise fully, and they're not fully known. So that's why it's hermeneutic. So the concept of that nature is trying to mention here, that rather than the bird would be flying at night, it will be actually flying within the day. And that's Heidegger's, for example, when he talks about nature in terms of the event, and when the event was first associated to nature was Heidegger's interpretation, which was directly that thinking of what will come from the future, things that yet to come, things that yet to happen. But they are associated to us as much as the past is associated to us. And that's the
Okay.
whole, time of eternity or something. Yeah.
Anything to add, Rumpel, or do we want to move on to the next one?
I feel grossly underqualified to go through the poetry now. I'm really grateful for these editions. These are great. Thank you.
54. To my reader. I am the cook. Good teeth, strong stomach, with you be. And once you have got down my book, you should get on with me.
Einem Leser. My readers. 54. Ein gut Gebiss und einen guten Magen. Dies wünsche ich dir. Und hast du erst meinen Buch vertragen, verträgst du dich gewiss mit mir. Ooh, the last line is great. Vertragen, verträgst. Verträgst is the past tense here. So vertragen is to sort of like to endure. To stomach. To stomach something. Verträgst du dich gewiss mit mir? So you can bear or you can stomach your gewiss. Gewiss is your not knowledge necessarily. Gewiss. Conscience, yeah. Yeah, so like the you should get on with me is not is fair, but it's like I don't know, slightly deeper in German. I don't know. There's gewiss also can be used as an adverb for like certainly or security. So there's like a
interesting. Okay.
play there, yeah. It's on the one hand conscience, but it's also when you use it as an adverb, you can use it to talk about like other related terms other than sicherlich and sicher. Stimmt, just like certainty or like certainly. Zweifellos, which is without a doubt. And natürlich, like naturally. Yeah. I'm just hinting. There's more to the you should get on with me. It's the word gewiss und verträgst is well used for that. Can you endure me? Can you stomach
Okay,
me?
yeah.
Can you digest me? With like a, is your conscience clean when you in digesting me kind of thing.
I'm noticing the phrasing for the English seems very different for these first. Like it seems like maybe for It
I
seems
am the
like the
cook is
first
kind of
part.
inserted, actually. You're right. Ein gut Gebiss
Yeah.
und einen guten Magen. A good jaw and a good stomach
He
was
added a
the opening
producer
line.
tag in there. The Stanford translation starts it off with strong teeth and good digestion too. This I wish thee. Yeah, that's pretty close to what the Google Translate is saying as well, and how you were reading it. And once my books agreed with you, then surely you'll agree with me. That's how they chose to translate that one. So it's sort of the idea of that the digestion of this book sort of leading to a good conscience relative to Nietzsche or in relation to Nietzsche. Right? It's very interesting theming for digestion, especially considering some of the other places in Nietzsche's work that digestion comes up. Very, very consistent theme.
Walzian's got a comment here, jumping off from Brooks's, from Jody mentioning Brooks talking about this on the stream the other day. Yeah, a sick culture is one that can't ingest another that is more spicy.
Or yeah, can't digest. I don't know about ingest, but digest for sure. We could say maybe racialism is sort of a form of indigestion.
Hello.
Hello?
Um, like, like, we like in Deleuze on Nietzsche, right? There is an argument that is kind of like boiled down the Deleuze, like saying that kind of we always think that we have done enough when we understand an organism, right? In terms of reactive forces or forces, right? And the nature of reactive forces and their quivering like fascinate us, right? So if we want to understand Nietzsche and we want to understand this idea about digestion, right? If we do understand, right, we have to grasp only the reactive forces for what they are, right? Which mean that like
Jody asked, you might have said this and I missed it, but is that last line meant to be like aggressive, or is that a weird translation?
kind of you. Yeah. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, didn't want to interrupt you too much.
I think you were cutting in and out there a bit, Marcellus.
Yeah. Our right.
Yeah, so Jody's got a comment here. You might have said this and I missed it, but is that last line meant to be like aggressive, or is that a weird translation? Like, after you digest my book, you should fight me or criticize me or something different. And then Reggie replies with, or go beyond Nietzsche.
I would say not on my reading at least, and not what it looks like from the other translations and the German. It looks more like there will be sort of a mutual understanding or a mutual consciousness, right?
Yeah.
I think
The
he's
original
just
also
saying
has
I've
it
got
with an
some pretty
exclamation
strong
mark.
ideas, but once you get them down, you should agree that I'm right.
Yeah, it is a little like it's sort of cheeky, right? He's sort of saying, if you understand my book, you'll agree with me, right?
Yeah, you should be able to, if you have digested, vertragen, if you can bear, you can, vertragen. Like, there's that word play here with the whole organic, digestive kind of aspect. But if you can manage the first book, then you will also be able to manage, in your conscience, me.
Hmm. I don't think it's very original to the text, but Kaufman's translation does sound right for euphemism. That's what I was having a chuckle over it. Like, he uses very euphemistic language. Once you have got down my book, you should get on with me. I don't know, interesting choice of wording. Maybe just me. But as I said, I don't think that's really... I don't think the euphemism is very faithful to the original text. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but if not, I'll move on.
Short thing. We have to explore between the, active force and reactive force, right? And
Yeah, I mean, I think this this last poem that we went over is sort of along those lines, right? The active and the reactive, the
yeah,
future and the past.
I mean, what is the activity capable of? Like, what is said of consciousness? Like, must be said of memory and habit, right? We must always say that of nutrition and reproduction, right? And conservation and adaptation. These are reactive functions, right? Reactive specialization that i- that that express some kind of reactive forces, right?
Sure.
That is in a way that is inevitable that consciousness see the organism from its own point of view and understand it, right? In its own way. It say reactively, right? What has happened, right? That
Yeah.
follows in science, right? Like science
Yeah,
follows
making
the path of consciousness.
the way he ends up talking about it later is sort of this process of uh making sense, right? Making sense of something, sort of in an active sense, right? Producing a a line of reasoning, producing a line of sense making.
Mm, yeah.
Number 55. Realistic painters. Quote, true to nature, all the truth. That's art. Unquote. This hollowed notion is a threadbare fable. Infinite is nature's smallest part. They paint what happens to delight their heart. And what delights them? What to paint, they're able.
50, der realistische Maler. Treu die Natur und ganz, wie fangt er's an? Wann ware je Natur in Bilde abgetan? Unendlich ist das kleinste Stück der Welt. Er malt zuletzt davon, was ihm gefällt. Und was gefällt ihm? Was er malen kann.
By the way,
Die
I just remembered if anyone's relatively new to joining here, uh, we do have the PDF if you're ever trying to follow it along on your own or in between sessions or don't like the way that I scroll all the time. You can find that here. I'm forwarding it now, but just so everyone can have it. But anyway, go ahead, Rumble. Sorry.
You're good. The opening line with the quote and then colon, that's art. In the original, instead of the colon, we've got the M dash and then "Wie fangt es an," which is how he begins. So the line being true to nature and total, und ganz. Ganz is like all. So like there's a totalization of that opening proclamation, true to nature und ganz. It's like
Right.
almost like another way to say it colloquially in German is like true to something und ganz is like and then some, to the nth degree.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the
Universal.
M dash "Wie fangt es an" is how one starts, and then comes the colon. So the sort of that's art is it's an insert. But I
Yeah.
get what he's getting at with the using that as the translation.
I could see him thinking that he's getting a similar thing, but this just seems like a complete insertion that doesn't have much to do with the original. How do they begin? How does he begin? Very different. And also not in the quotes.
The remainder is reasonably accurate. Although the question that's in the second line, which is set up from the colon at the end of the first line in the original. So how does he then start is kind of like so there's the opening proclamation from supposedly the people who are painting like this, the realistic painters. How do they then start? Colon. And then, wann war je Natur im Bilde abgetan? Which is a question from Nietzsche, I think, more than a question necessarily from the painters. The second sentence is, when was ever nature inside the build, like in the image, represented? Or like laid there, abgetan.
Yeah. When was nature ever sort of recreated in a painting?
Or recreated faithfully in a painting, abgetan.
There's so much to unpack here, but basically the old sort of, when you read Italian art theory, in the earlier times, and I mean in Roman times, the idea was the art should imitate nature. However, later on in the 15th century, the 1400s, 1500s, you're getting into periods where in Italian art theory, people actually say by simply copying nature, you're basically like, it's like you're chained in a corner and then you're painting the wall in the corner and saying how wonderful it is. So this more speaks to his idea of what peoples of the past's ideas of art were, which is not an accurate reflection of their views in the previous period. But without going into that too much, he
Would
kind of
realism have
knows
been
it,
big
like
in
you've
Germany
just
at the
had.
time?
No, what you just had is the Biedermeier period, and we were about to have the rise of the modern period. And he also just had
Right,
after the
okay.
Biedermeier the sort of Romantic period. So paintings of Yeah. Like if you know there was some revolutions in Germany, and then you had this kind of really kitschy art called the Biedermeier. Are you guys familiar with it?
I'm looking it up now.
And
Like
it's kind
bourgeois
of a
art is what it looks
strange
like.
art because actually, well, it kind of is, because like chocolate box art, like really kitschy. But if you imagine you just had this huge turmoil, but what people were painting was actually this kind of slightly imagined, tranquil, waltzing in cornfields and stuff. Yeah.
Also understand that naturalism within like the realist art tradition was like a thing in the 19th century. Is that related to the Biedermeier thing?
I see it more as it's kind of art, like nostalgic, but it's an imagined past that never really existed.
Yeah, sort of folksy romanticism.
People people kind of look at particularly Dutch art today and think that those paintings were paintings of reality, but they like the idea of the painting was that they used the devices of painting things as they looked real so people would recognize them, but they created a pure invention by moving the buildings around, placing symbolic objects in the painting, etc. So they are a work of pure invention. Like when you look at a painting by someone like Vermeer, the room never existed, and neither did the objects in it. They're all just invention from the painter to try and tell you something. But people, yeah, you have to really go into the like complex art theory to look at what people thought about and what were the theory that the painters were reading at the different point in time when they were painted.
Fortunately, I think that's not
But
necessary for
people
this, because I
always
think he's
wanted
talking about philosophers.
a return. Yeah, people always wanted a return to nature. Like if you think about Greenberg, the art critic, he wrote mostly on abstract art, the modern people in like the post World War II period, but he desired for a return to a paintings of nature, but it never really happened in his lifetime.
I think here Nietzsche kind of gives an indication that he's not necessarily talking directly about painting, though, that he's talking about philosophers. Like he's analogizing it to painting, but they paint what happens to delight their heart, and what delights them, to paint they're able. Clunky wording, but he's saying people produce what they are able to, what's in their capacity, and they are sort of retroactively claiming that, right, as the thing that's great and makes them happy.
You can read the first line as kind of ideology, like that people believe they're saying the whole truth of what is seen, like showing reality. But this is in the second line. This is not true, and we know it.
I don't really. I wouldn't really use the word ideology. I mean, I think here of like the Platonic, or as Afnan is mentioning, more of like a Kantian, sort of these totalizing analyses, and sort of this claim to like truth with a capital T, right?
I think. Can I interject? Or
Go ahead.
okay, I think that it's kind of like asking what is the body, right? The nature of the body, right? What is the body? Of course, we know from Nietzsche and from Deleuze that it is a reactive, an active force, right? But I think that it more reminded me of the Treatise of Human Nature by David Hume, when he established the difference of way of examining the mind as well as the body, right? He said roughly that one may consider it either as an anatomist or as a painter, either to discover the most secret thing and principles, or to describe the grace or beauty of its actions, right? He said
Okay, yeah.
that roughly he said, I imagine it is possible to conjoin these two views, right? Where you kind of pull off the skin and display all the minute parts, right? And he said that like it will appear something trivial, you know? Even the noblest attitudes and the most vigorous actions, nor can you ever render the object graceful or engendering by clothing the parts again with the skin and flesh and presenting only their bare outside. An anatomist, however, can give every good advice to the painter, right? And like an anatomist can give like every good advice, and in a like manner, like persuade that a metaphysician may be very helpful to a moralist, though I cannot easily conceive these two characters united in the same work, right? So
Okay,
I
yeah.
think that he's kind of doing like David Hume, right? Where it's kind of like the nature of the body and the nature of the relation of reactive and active force, right? To nature, to the fancy, right? Because we have to understand that Nietzsche believed that consciousness affects the external world, right? These forces comes from like Freud, right? So yeah, these
Mhm.
affects comes from the external world.
Trying to see how active and reactive fit
Just
into
say one
this.
last
But while I do
thing.
that, there's yeah, go ahead.
But I'd say it is, for me, it is really challenging the ideas of
You're
his
cutting out
day, the
really bad.
romantic ideal. I'd say that it is about art, and it is really challenging the ideas of his day, the romantic ideal of painting to nature, and saying that art is a subjective and personal thing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think you're probably right that he is talking about art, but you could definitely expand this to sort of talk about his approach to philosophy.
Afnan's comment in with a direct quote from Genealogy of Morals ties it over, and I think you could see it in the more literal sense. Just a small reminder, though, that that's art is an insert from Kaufman. So the idea of like this is specifically about art or the field of art, I think Kaufman could be potentially suggestively leading us down that path a bit too much with that first end of that first line. Yeah, I think it could be both.
Yeah, like the Stanford translation doesn't even include any mention of art, and it doesn't look like the German does. To all of nature true, how does he plan? Would nature fit an image made by man? The smallest piece of world is infinite. He ends up painting that which he painting that which he sees fit. And what does he see fit? Paint what he can.
Just
Perhaps in
wanted
the
to
future,
highlight Afnan's. Sorry,
I might
cut you off
just end
there.
up reading from the Stanford and trying to stream this somehow. I'll see if I can figure something out. I wish we just had a PDF.
Let's read out Valsian's comment. Valsian mentions here from Genealogy of Morals, quote, I wish to emphasize is that Kant, just like other philosophers, instead of envisaging the aesthetic problem from the standpoint of the experiences of the artist, parentheses, the creator, has only considered art and beauty from the standpoint of the spectator, and has thereby imperceptibly imported the spectator himself into the idea of the, quote, beautiful. But if only the philosophers of the beautiful had sufficient knowledge of this, quote, spectator, exclamation mark. Afnan also made a comment about the use of nature here is mainly Schilling and even Rousseau to some extent, who has the concept of a, quote, attraction of nature. And there was a question too from Gemini, which we circled briefly away from like 5-10 minutes ago, just the use of the word infinite and its relationship to kind of nature and nature's smallest parts. And Gemini, you asked why, quote, infinite is nature's smallest part feels out of place to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the idea of it, sort of irreproducibility, right?
Yeah. The original German is unendlich ist das kleinste Stück der Welt, exclamation mark, which comes right after the counter, right? So the opening line, then the counter from Nietzsche, which ends with a question mark. The third line for me is Nietzsche's explanatory remark, which is endless is the smallest part of the world. For me, it's the irreducibility. I wouldn't focus in on infinite, because infinite is not used in the original. Infinitum is not referenced. It's the endlessness of the smallest parts.
All the translations, Google Translate and the Stanford, all choose the word infinite. It's interesting.
And that third line too, I think, supports the kind of counter-Kantian reading as well, because he's not using this irreducibility of the smallest parts of the world, and using the word unendlich, the sort of endlessness thereof. You could also read that directly against the Kantian, thing in and of itself, kind of noumena, phenomena differential.
Okay, it looks like just unendlich is often translated as infinite, but yeah, I mean, etymologically it makes sense that unending would be, which is, similar overlaps with infinite, but not exactly the same thing. But I think it gets at the same idea, right? That there's no length you can go to perfectly capture something in its most minute detail, right?
There is no perfect spectator position that is anointed and, privileged.
Yeah. No perfect spectator and no perfect artist. As he said, the The artist paints what he can. Okay, number 56. Poet's Vanity. Give me glue, and in good time I'll find wood myself to crowd sense into 4 silly rhymes is enough to make one proud.
Dichter Eitelkeit. Gebt mir Leim nur, denn zum Leim finde ich selber mich schon Holz, Sinn in 4 Insigne. He's omitting, he's shortening words to kind of keep them rhyming, and I'm not used to it. So I'm going to read that one again. Gebt mir Leim nur, denn zum Leime finde ich selbst mir schon Holz, Sinn in 4 unsinnige Reime legen ist kein kleiner Stolz.
Just give me glue for the glue. I'll find the wood for it myself.
Yeah, gib mir Leim nur. Lime is like wood glue. Leimen, Leime is to glue.
Ah, yeah.
Gebt mir Leim nur. Only give me glue. Because, or then, in order to glue, I will find my own wood.
Right. And then sin is like sense, right?
Yeah, Sinn, sense, like the sense, yes. Reason is another. You can kind of translate it in a bunch of different ways.
Making sense.
Yeah, meaning, sense.
I know we talked about this in Twilight of
that's the
Isles,
better one.
making sense.
Yeah. Like the signification of meaning. Yeah, but Sinn, Inhalt, Bedeutung.
I don't think it necessarily always has to be specifically signification, but it's the making sense of.
Yeah, because there is a crossover into Verstand, Denken und Gedanken, which is thinking and thoughts, and Geist. Like there is a crossover here, so.
One of the reasons I mentioned that is the translation is very important for logic of sense, which is not something I have a total grasp on. I just an important thing to note is that the logic of sense draws very much on Nietzsche and on this idea of sense and making sense. And some of the language that is used is more in line with that language than some of the ways that it's sort of commonly or translated into common verbiage for English, which is often as a meaning. So anyway, I guess this time Kaufman does translate it as sense as well, actually. Sense into 4 silly rhymes is enough to make one proud. Close enough, looks like.
It feels odd for this one to appear kind of at this point. There's my takeaway from this is a sense of it's coming to bear with like the mode and medium in which he's writing directly. So there could well be like critique buried in here, but there's also this part of me that wonders: is he taking sort of a little jive at himself in writing in rhymes and feeling sort of smart about himself?
Could be. Yeah.
I read it more as almost like the self-contentness of the poet who, if you give him glue, he'll find something to glue it to. And if you give him words, he'll make something out of it, even if it's silly, absurd. And there's almost a self-contentness here where even though he's not, he'd prefer to even be, or the poet would be prefer to even be out of the gates because he's kind of content doing his little absurdities here.
Yeah, I can dig that reading too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say maybe absurdities. I would say maybe like sort of, because he's talking about making sense, right? And so sort of this analogy to the glue and the gluing would be like find one thing connecting to another thing, right? And so the poet is just connects two things and is sort of self-satisfied, right? Um, JQE says that was Leibniz. Whether or not necessarily the but if it's read
Could
not
we explain
sardonically,
that?
then yeah, would you mind
Leibniz comment?
elaborating that? Yeah. The fish quote.
Okay. Yep.
Got it.
It was, I think, from the previous one, the
Yeah.
irreducibility of nature. Within every fish is another pond teeming with fish. Just tie a bow on that. Afnan's added a great comment.
But
Should I... Afnan, do you want... Marcellus, we are on poem 56, Poet's Vanity. Afnan, I think your comment here might be a bit more about the previous one, but because you're mentioning Dionysus, I was having a quick scan of it. Yeah, I'm just going to read it out.
should read it out, and then I have a
since...
comment that's relevant to it.
Okay, cool. Yep. So I'm just going to read out Afnan's and I'll pass over to you, Jay. So Afnan writes, since it hasn't been very clear, I'll try to explain a little bit. By Nietzsche's discovery of Dionysus, philosophy finally discovers the possible path to pushing the Kantian aesthetic of the fantastic to its furthest limits. Dionysus is the, quote, conceptual person who can miraculously accomplish the task of a Kantian sublime who, due to the burden of moral obligation that bound his philosophy, could not tread the safe paths of art. Parentheses, not sure if I'm using the right terms that Kant was where concepts were translated into English, but this is how I would. Kant, too, was a Socratic in his way, and therefore lacked, quote, a sense of the future of German art, as Nietzsche said several times. With Dionysus, meaning with the sublime settled forever in the joyful habits of art. The philosopher can transform life, as it was for the ancient Greeks, who into an aesthetic phenomenon, and man himself into an artistic work. Yes.
Immanuel Kant had a massive vision to music other than military marches, and he was totally indifferent to the visual arts. He only owned one engraving that's like a black and white sort of pressed lithograph sort of print, a portrait of Rousseau, which had been given to him. I find that hilarious. If you can imagine, the critic Clement Greenberg, who I mentioned before, was also a Kantian, the one who was like a champion of the abstract art and modern art movements, and then he was someone who really wanted a return to nature painting, but as I said, it never happened in his lifetime.
There seems to be a bunch of like facts about Kant that are clicking together to really form a particular image of a person. Someone who's never left the city from which they grew up, writes about peoples all across the world.
No, don't say that.
I'd say that. Am I wrong?
No, it's true. But like, I mean, although I'm explaining Nietzsche's position on Kant's aesthetics, I disagree fundamentally with his understanding of. But that's a different argument to go through it. So yeah, don't take Nietzsche's. Anyway, yeah, I'm not gonna go into that. But yeah.
I will avoid character assassination purely on these grounds.
But
Okay, number 57. Choosy taste. If it depends on my choice, I think it might be great to have a place in paradise. Better yet, outside the gate.
»57. Wählerischer Geschmack. Wenn man frei mich wählen ließe, wählt ich gern ein Plätzchen mir, mittendrin in Paradies, gerne noch vor seiner Tür.« The third line, to have a place in paradise, the setup between line 3 and line 4, because he contradicts himself in line 4. Mittendrin in Paradies, so in the middle of paradise, Poland. Actually, like gerne noch. Actually, I changed, like sort of like change my mind. I have a stronger preference for seiner Tür, in front of its door.
Interesting. Okay.
I just want to say something about this piece specifically, because like Nietzsche can be seen in some sense talking about he's trying to withdraw paradise from something that would come later in the end of the earth or whatever, like the Abrahamic tradition of paradise. And Nietzsche is literally, his work can literally be seen some sense of withdrawing this paradise, rather it being in a different world, in a different life, it being right now. Because paradise is where there is no morality, there's no good and evil. It's not there is no good and evil, it's literally beyond good and evil. That the concepts of good and evil don't even apply in paradise. And so this piece to me is one of the, as I said last time, like the first part of this book, the poems, the fragments, Nietzsche is trying to open up, to draw a line of his work completely, and this is one of those parts that he tries to tell you everything you would know later from one piece, through one fragment or something.
Last one. I also see this kind of the setup of the start of this reminds me just sort of scantly of the sort of Socratic, Platonic, what is good for me is good in and of itself kind of loosey-goosey concept, and then kind of deviating from that.
So paradise is always whatever is beyond things. So
You
even
read
the
in paradise or a perfect place.
I think that's a different
This
argument
idea
because
is
that
that
the paradise.
having a place, having
Yeah, go
a
ahead.
place of your own outside is better.
I mean, that's
Like there
not
could be
what
a
Nietzsche is trying
perfect,
to do, but that's a
yeah.
no, that's a different discussion. But paradise, heaven, are always the thing that is beyond, and beyond in the literal meaning of it. Like even like the feminist theory later, especially in the 60s and 70s. So Nietzsche's work of paradise, for example, as something that is beyond gender. So so there is this book. Anyway, I don't know how it would be translated, but perhaps uh, Web Beyond that through the Zarathustra. Anyway, this would be mentioned in Zarathustra if you've read Zarathustra as well, in the same sense, in the same notion, which is a paradise, a heaven that is without gate, something that, because like the concept of heaven and the religion is something that you will go into and then it will be closed or in some sense. Uh, Nature tries to make this world is the paradise with whatever in it.
Yeah, I'm actually really coming around to your interpretation because it's plural. And that's lost here. It's paradises in plural, not in singular. So if I have a choice, the choice
The
is here
literal,
basically Nietzsche's saying it's not just one paradise. I get to choose amongst all the paradises. Paradiese, it's
the
plural.
literal meaning of paradise is actually a walled garden. It comes from like ancient Persian, and we have it through the Bible, and obviously people use it, but the literal meaning is a walled garden. Imagine there's a walled garden, but I'd rather have my own place outside the walled garden, just outside the gate. My own
This also reminds me of
place.
Epicurus and his garden. You know, having escaped the city and choosing to live a somewhat frugal life, not for frugality's sake in and of itself, but sort of for pragmatic reasons in the sense that one's safety and security is perhaps more threatened if one lives ostentatiously outside of the protection of the city. But to then still have one's garden, a smaller garden of one's own.
I'm not sure where I would quite get the having one's own garden, at least from this. I'm not sure that follows. Sam asks, do you think it's important that he's right outside the gate? Like maybe able to perceive a little bit, but not quite. Yes, I do. I'm reminded of this poem that we
I
just
say
went over,
yes.
53. Sort of the eagle in pursuit, right? This sort of forward-looking, becoming. Paradise is sort of the next step. We're always entering paradise, right?
I think you're right, because Nietzsche could have entered the line with gerne noch außer seiner Tür, outer, beyond its boundary, like away from. But he's saying vor seiner Tür, which is like in front of. Vor doesn't necessarily say it's right in front of, but the other German choices that would have kept it rhyming would have implied a greater distance. So I think that's a fair interpretation, or a fair reading.
Did you have something to say, Reggie? There's just a little bit of sound coming through. So if you didn't have a comment to add, I would appreciate muting up, and you can unmute for any comments. Thanks.
You could think of it in terms of law, like living like sort of on the fringes or outside, but if things went wrong, not that he's kind of hinting towards this, but back on that kind of that paradise.
I'm not quite sure I see that one either, but I think it's an interesting comment. All good, Reggie.
Well, like we live like with wherever levels of a state, and some people sort of push the boundaries of those and try to kind of hide, but if things went wrong for them, they could always fall. This isn't his argument, but I'm just you could apply it. It's like that. It's like a way, like living on the edge, trying to live kind of just outside the law or just
okay.
outside. Yeah, whatever that thing is could be paradise.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing it a little more. I think paradise would be a strange choice of words in that case, but I could definitely see that being a possible reading, at least, for sure. A crooked nose. Its nostrils proud and pliant. The nose looks out, defiant. That's why a rhino without horn, you fall forward, proud little man, and straight pride generally grows, together with a crooked nose.
Just pre-reading this a bit. Die krumme Nase, 58. Die Nase schauet trütziglich ins Land, der Nützer bläht sich. Drum fällst du, Nashorn ohne Horn, mein stolzes Menschlein stets nach vorn. Und jetzt beisammen find ich das, Räder stolz, gekrümmt nass. Gekrümmt Nas. Shortened with the E there, but yeah, it means nose. Yeah.
A rhino without horn.
The you fall forward feels like a slight insert. That third last line. Ein stolzes Menschlein. Mensch, human, mankind, kind of. With the line being the diminutive. A proud, sort of diminutive man. Sort of, it's the play with that. Stets nach vorn. Stets nach vorn I wouldn't say it's falling. It's kind of like it's something you would say to a platoon who is readying up to present themselves at morning whatever roll call and have to stand going from ease to standing in attention. That's not fun. You would kind of bark out as the drill sergeant. I can see why Kaufman wrote, "You fall forward, proud little man." Yeah, anyway.
I think I get the end of the poem.
Stetzes also can imply movement in a direction.
So wait, what is he sort of saying is the rhino without horn? What is that? I'm not sure I really understand what that sentence is related to.
Oh, right, and that's where the fall comes from, because it's in the third sentence in the OG. Drum fällst du, therefore you fall, Nashorn ohne Horn. Rhino. So, like, it's a play with word. Rhino in German is Nashorn. So you fall for, like, therefore you fall, you know, the horned one without a horn. My proud little human, that's nach vorn. Keep going in that direction. Hence the, like, falling forward, yeah. No, that's very fair then by Kaufman, to put it that way.
I'm still not really sure what it means for the person. What does it mean for them to be a rhino without a horn?
It's not that it's without a horn, it's just that its horn is malshapen and crooked, because pride grows horns. Rarely do you get pride without also growing a crooked. It's a joke on a crooked nose being counterposed to kind of like the splendor of a proper nashorn, a rhino with its horn. Within German, the word horn being in the name of the animal, then being like, oh, you're a nashorn without the horn, which is the very thing that defines its name. And if it has a horn at all, like if someone were to go, oh look, it does have a horn, you're like, no, that's just a crooked nose.
Ah, I see.
Okay, you know how people fight and get like punched in the nose and have a crooked nose? Like it's kind of like an argument against this kind of pride. And yeah, like it's generally that it's kind of people who are defiant and pick fights, but perhaps without much of a point, usually have a crooked nose. Because it ends up.
Yeah, I think the word straight
as a fist
pride
fight,
is sort of a funny
crooked nose
choice
is
of
like
words.
yeah,
like it's almost like uptight, right? Rumple. It's more like sort of
yeah. Gerader Stolz is like a straight pride. It's a pride that lacks humility. It's in the last line. So gerader Stolz. The setup is und stets beisammen finde ich das, and it's even repeating stets nach vorn, so keeping the directionality going of the people he's talking about. And then I find in the direction that I'm observing this in, sort of like I consistently find that they come together. A straight pride.
Wait,
and
this is also a euphemism
nose.
for sure. Upright pride is definitely a euphemism, right? That's like penis.
Yeah, could in theory. I think that's not unfair.
Okay, yeah. So it's like this idea of sort of this like pride kind of in a, like I was saying, kind of like in a phallic masculinity sense, right? And also that that can't really be put away, put down, and that's sort of landing in the you end up as the rhinoceros without a horn, because you're sort of carrying around the pride, but don't really have the thing to be proud of, right? That also is sort of balancing you, the horn. Okay. Yeah, I think I get it.
Um, it totally like the rhino without horn. It reminds me of Deleuze, the body without organ, because rhino is also a body, right? And the horn is one of the organs of the rhino, right? But it remind me of that.
I'm not sure I would
So
draw that direct connection, but I think that's a funny note. But with that,
You
I think we're
could
going to
argue it's like a crucial
more.
organ for a rhino.
Actually, I think we're going to end off here. We've been going for about an hour and a half.
Yeah, if you're feeling it, if you want to call it earlier today, I think this next one's going to evoke longer discussion, potentially. The longer one too, at least than the last one.